like approval of the agenda and approval of the minutes, and if there's any.
Whatever. I'm like, you know, I'm doing it.
Agenda, and corrections on that.
Wait, this is an A and B conversation.
File this.
Are you just gonna
Get that in the minutes.
Just everything.
So we have to move to
Put this in the minutes.
suspend the rules.
No, that's
Or to move to.
No
Three
one-
parentheses.
No one reads the minutes. Put it
I
in.
know, honestly.
Put it in.
I read them.
I read them before, so I found it very useful.
Mandy,
Because I tried to-
That can be
Oh, okay.
can I ask them why?
Or, I mean, really, it's.
What the?
It's just like the mistake is not really like changing anything, so you could just like delete the asterisk.
Oh,
Yeah, we just don't vote to take an action.
Yeah, there's no vote or action being taken, we're just discussing.
It made 33 cents.
So maybe just clarify,
Wait, what are they doing?
that it should be a discussion item, not an action item.
I'm like
that
in
you're
training week right now,
permitting.
so I'm literally like booked from like morning to like night.
okay.
And then like I go die and then like put my
Do they all
routine
party?
What?
Do they all party?
Oh, someone's here.
Yeah, but I don't go because I'm like still studying.
Oh, so everyone moved in and everything.
Are you excited to like meet your kids?
Yeah.
And be like,
I love my kids.
You're gonna have all your children. It's amazing.
it's,
What's up?
are you
I mean,
excited?
so it looks like you
I'm
said
giving
by
the
the
I like
July
them.
18th.
Yeah, okay.
Sarah
whatever.
People will hang out.
Oh,
Yeah.
I can't be like my boss said that I can't be on the USAC table.
She said, she said.
Great, so we're gonna
Ross said that.
continue.
She said I can't be.
We're gonna go back to the
She's a lot.
approval of the agenda and any amendments made. So we're just gonna do that again to accommodate for the technical difficulties.
Activities.
Hello? Okay, all right, so the approval of, well, the amendments to the agenda. Can we go back to the, we're amending it? Okay,
Yeah, I moved to add an officer report in agenda.
great. So we're adding an officer report to the agenda. A second,
Some
okay.
people want to have dinner.
Wait, no one motioned to begin.
Actually, I'm second.
And a motion to approve the change to the agenda?
Can I make another change?
Oh, yes, of course.
Can I move to remove my office member report?
Yeah,
Great, thank you.
so movement to remove the officer report.
Do we have to vote on this? No.
Are there any other changes to the agenda?
We want to clarify that the budget is
Okay,
is a presentation discussion, not an action.
Right, so underneath business where we were talking about a preliminary USAC budget, it's not an action item, it's a discussion item. So, ignore the little star. Any additional changes to the agenda? Can I get a motion to approve the amendments to the agenda? Zara?
Oh, do I have to say? I moved to approve the agenda as well.
Great, can I get a second?
I second to move to approve the agenda.
Yeah, great. So now we're gonna take a vote on whether or not we want to approve this amended agenda. So everyone present, would you please raise your hand if you are in favor of the amendments to the agenda? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Great, 5. And Chloe, would you get off mute and say whether or not you approve the minutes to the agenda? So you can say yes, no, or abstain.
Yes.
Great. 6, and then Saran? Do you approve the amendments to the agenda?
I haven't heard Swan speak.
I heard her speaking in the beginning. I can't forget her.
So Saran, would you please say yes, no, or abstain?
She said yes.
She said yes?
Based on the.
Oh, okay.
Is there a chat?
She can thumbs up.
Okay, because I can't see. All right, 7. Okay, so 7 yeses. Anyone voting no? Is anyone abstaining? Okay, so the agenda passes by a vote of 7 to 0 to, I'm guessing one abstain because Divya didn't vote, but I mean,
Wait, I voted.
you did?
I said yeah.
You have to raise, I didn't see
Oh,
you.
I did. Wait,
Maybe it was a little one.
what? Get it in a minute, Kevin.
Oh, yeah, I did.
What?
I was
So wait.
oh, we voted, but your hand wasn't up, so I just assumed you were like not.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought.
You can't.
Summer, y'all.
Okay, so, so the amendment to the agenda passes for a vote to 8-0.
We're 2 minutes.
Great, okay, so now we're going to, approve the minutes from the last USAC meeting. Can I get a motion to approve last week's meetings? Justin, great, can I get a second?
A second.
Great, so now we're going to take a vote, everyone, a vote to approve the minutes from the last USAC meeting. All those in favor, raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6, great, all right, going, to Chloe, do you approve the minutes? Yes, no?
Yeah.
Yeah. Great, Saran?
Why can't we hear
Yes, okay, great, so the vote passes on a vote of 8-0. All right, so now we're gonna move into the public comment section. So there's 3 minutes for this section, and the way it works is anyone who wants to speak gets 2 minutes to talk, and we're gonna do 2 rounds. One's gonna be audio only, so you'll only be heard, and then the second round is gonna be audio and video, so you'll be heard and seen. So we're just gonna go around the room. If anyone wants to give a public comment. Anyone? Nobody? Going once? Okay, so nobody wants to give public comment, so we will move on to our officer reports. Does Vicky have a proxy? Does she still? Okay, because in the agenda it says that, the IVP is going to give an officer report, but she's not present. So, do we just skip it? Okay, we'll just skip it. Okay, Chloe, do you have a report for us?
Yeah, just a few things real quick. So the first thing is that I mentioned at our last meeting that we had to go to the Westwood Neighborhood Council meeting, and so what came out of that is that the Westwood Neighborhood Improvement Association as well as the Westwood Neighborhood Council are working with myself as well as the GSA EVP and Office of the President to create kind of this like student engagement committee, and basically what it would be student representatives who would have quarterly meetings with members of both of these associations where they would be sitting down and kind of offering feedback and suggestions. So that's one thing we're working on formally organizing right now. And can you hear me okay? Yeah?
Yeah.
Cool. And the second thing is that, I mentioned this in the group chat, but our applications for the Student Organizing Summit have been released, and those applications will be due July 8th, the evening of that day. And I had Zara ask me a question about this I really appreciated, and she was basically asking me if kind of, I guess, kind of like what it would be like for council members or members of their offices to apply. And so my answer to that is that yes, like you all are more than welcome to apply. You're more than welcome to have your office members apply. But something that we will take into consideration when we're considering what students to take is who generally wouldn't have access to opportunities like this. And then later on, when we consider applications for the Student of Color Conference as well as Student Lobbying Conference, we're also going to be taking into consideration what students haven't already been on conferences. And so just keep in mind that we're trying to be kind of more equitable about who gets to go on these. And so if you do decide to go to SOS, you're more than welcome to. It's just that if you do also want to go to SOC or SLC in the future, then we will take into consideration that you have already been to SOS. And feel free to let me know if you have any other questions about that, and definitely pass along the application to your office staffers or just any communities that you're part of.
Great, thank you. All right, so now we're gonna move on to Academic Affairs Commission.
Okay, so we met with the Powell Library yesterday. We're getting them to move more book stacks to put more study spaces and tables out, and they've already started that in the reading room, but we're trying to force them to do it upstairs as well. And then also, they have numbers on how many people are at the library per hour, and we're trying to make sure that that's accessible for students on the library website. to also make sure that when students log into the library website, they'll have like similar to what the Hill is doing right now with the the dining halls. It'll have like a percentage of how many students are in there, if it's too packed, if it's not packed, and then it's making it like easier for students to see like the availability in the library. We met with Jasmine Resch. She is the Dean of Student Conduct, I'm pretty sure. We talked about making sure that students know the do's and don'ts of plagiarism and citing materials. So what we're doing is we're going to the International Transition Program and also Transfer Transitions, and I'm talking to orientation currently, trying to make sure that there are those materials available for students. And then also during International Education Week, which is the first week of the quarter or fall quarter, we're going to integrate that material so that students that are international know what UCLA is kind of asking for out of students that are writing essays and being a part of the educational, like academic environment here. And then finally, we are planning on giving out 200 notebooks on the first days of school, so Monday and Tuesday or the first 2 days of school, because they're alternate days. Because on top of getting all the school supplies and dorm supplies and apartment supplies, people usually forget notebooks and school supplies. So we're giving out notebooks and pencils. And I talked to Christina, and she might be joining us, giving out some stuff as well. And everyone's welcome to, but like, I mean, if you have stuff to give, and holla. But if you don't, then yeah, bring some pens, of course, because like underlying issue is like a lot of people don't have time to get some supplies. So that's me.
Great. Okay, so Financial Support Commission.
So I'm Erin's chief of staff, and so this past week we had our first meeting with the Parking Advocacy Task Force. We met with the parking director, Lisa Quibbling, and 4 other administrators from parking services, and we just basically discussed how this relationship is going to work. We're going to meet once a month with them, and we discussed some issues that transfer students are having right now with parking. And they asked us for feedback on some of their ideas and some things they're working on, like having a Uber drop-off locations throughout campus, and just figure out how many parking passes and how to promote other ways of commuting for students. And they told us about the bike share program that's going to be coming on campus soon, so students can rent bikes on campus, and they can drop them off in Santa Monica or Westwood, and just trying to promote other ways of getting to campus than driving, and encouraging people to carpool more.
Thank you. Facilities Commission.
Okay, so 4 things. 1, appointments are officially open for the Facilities Commission. So this is a great opportunity for students to be able to voice student perspectives on like large scale changes in regards to like campus infrastructure, environment, and accessibility of resources on campus. The appointments app will be released. We'll be posting it on social media and other avenues. So be sure to check out the appointments descriptions, as well as apply applications will be due on September 6th. Second, we'll be meeting with BCC tonight to finalize the customizations for the zine magazine on bystander intervention as well as consent. So we'll be sending over those customizations to be finalized and make them more like UCLA oriented. And then those magazines will be printed for new student orientation events. Third, there are now labels on Kirchhoff patio for recycling, composting, and landfill on our trash cans. So be sure to check that out. And then the last thing, we had our planning meeting for what's officially now known as Escape the Quake, Bruin Safe. It's going to be October 4th and October 12th from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. in Bruin Plaza and the Court of Sciences. So this event is going to be oriented towards earthquake safety and preparedness for that. The main event is going to be an escape room where students will be able to go in and find clues about how to be prepared for earthquakes as well as other emergencies. This is an opportunity for other organizations to table at the event. There are going to be demos from CERT there as well. I know that the Office of the President has committed to co-program for this event, and we're in the process of getting SWC CPR and First Aid to have demonstrations at the event too. So if you are interested in co-programming for this event or conducting outreach, we are going to be tabling at the USAC table for the different orientation sessions for summer in the union. But if you do have any ideas for outreach, co-programming, student organizations that might want to get involved, just please reach out. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, General 2.
Okay, so one thing real quick, I had a meeting with both Statue Center and New Student Orientation, and After the meeting, it has been decided that this summer during the orientation 109 to 111, the three orientation international students are going to have their own workshops during the orientation to learn about the cultural difference and learn about how to get a bank account or phone number and how to get more involved on campus.
Thank you. Okay, so going to our administrative representatives.
Nothing to report.
Nothing for me either.
And the only thing I want to talk about is the budget, and that will come up next.
Of course, okay. So moving on to new business, and again, just a reminder, this is a discussion item. Bolton?
Okay, so we sent out a preliminary budget that hopefully you had a chance to have a look at. Some of the big characteristics of your budget are going to be that, most of the decisions really are going to be sort of subsequent to this budget that I might characterize as the enabling document. So it's going to sort of put the big pieces of money into the various accounts. A lot of those are going to be decisions made, sub-budgets made by different commissioners or different funding bodies. So, much about the budget you can't necessarily vote to change because they come directly from the referenda. So if a referenda says, shall this amount of money be assessed to each student for this purpose, that's just what's going to be reflected in your budget. So we can't take money from Community Service Commission and move it over to Student Wellness Commission because that would be altering the will of the voters. So it's got to stay on those channels. But there is some motion for your flexibility. Your membership fee is your essentially your oldest fee, and that's one that has the most flexibility. At the same time, that's the fee that, given that flexibility, is the fee that has to do most of the lifting on your overall system-wide expenses. So some of your expenses are the expense of your accounting system to issue checks and to issue budgets and to allocate funds. So there's an overhead cost for that. Your stipends are in an overhead in the overhead budget. There are some limited charges for your space. You don't really pay any rent charges, but you do participate in a proportional share of utility expense and maintenance expense for the building. So that's in your, that all has to be covered by your membership fee. One thing that you'll see in your budget is that, happily, in a sense, since we continue to have increased enrollment, it takes some pressure off some of the lines. I've been indicating for a few years that the time's sort of coming when you may not really have any money. There's two lines that are at the bottom of your budget that are student government operating fund and student organization operating fund. And those two funds kind of operate as a remainder. So after everything else is paid, there's an amount remaining. And the remaining amount is divided according to the bylaws, 20% SGOF, 20% SUF. So you can't directly change it. You can affect that bottom line by, you can increase those numbers by decreasing some of the other expenses that you might be able to decrease. Though there's limited range of motion for that. But I just want to explain to you, your SUF and your SGOF are remainders. I had anticipated that the time would arrive soon in which there wouldn't be any remainder, and therefore the fund wouldn't exist. Happily, that has not yet arrived because the increase in enrollment and a few other decreases in costs, like we've managed to drive down the utility bills. Some of that's a sustainability good, some of it's just efficiency. So we've driven down some of the utility bills, so whatever share of that's about $4,000 of less expense. So a few things, have sort of shifted such that we still do have a remainder. There is money there for your SGOF and your SUF.
Right.
Yeah.
What is SGOF and SUF?
So Student Government Operating Fund, SGOF.
Mm-hmm.
Student Organization Operating Fund, SUF. So for SGOF, since this remainder has been declining for years, it got to the point about 2 years ago, I think, that there wasn't a sufficient amount of money. So Student Government Operating Fund is the part that pays your office's, what used to be pencils and paper budget is now, toner and whatever budget, right? The sort of operating your office. What was decided a few years ago, since it was a declining amount of money, that the commissions that receive dedicated money, such as your commission, you have money that a referenda specifically designates for your office, that those offices all chose to vote a bylaw that they withdrew from the SGOF, so that the offices that have no other way to have any operating money, like the gen reps, the transfer office, I think IVP doesn't, have any other dedicated money. Those would be the only offices that participate in SGOF, so that the remaining funds could, at least give them sufficient wherewithal to cover those expenses. So that's SGOF. SOOF, Student Organization Operating Fund, is a similar fund, but it is one that is meant for student groups. Just as you make office space available to some student groups where you can, you also make operating funds available to student groups that apply. And that process, I think that one is managed through the budget review director. And so that director manages, applications are given, and they sort of determine how much can be funded. So that's those two funds.
Before we start interrupting, but apparently we're having some technical difficulties with Saran, because she can no longer see us. So I just want to address that before we continue.
Okay, she can hear us?
Saran,
She's like not on at all.
what is written in the guidelines for summer guidelines in terms of this? Because isn't there like a 10-minute like you're done?
Yeah, it says that you can be absent for 10 minutes before you're considered not here, and then you have for the last 20 minutes of the meeting.
So do we feel she can indicate she can hear and is somehow present, or she's not able to indicate it?
She's just not there. She's not hanging out anymore.
Yeah, she said like it froze on her side. She couldn't see us. She couldn't hear us.
It might be her, because it looks like the picture's still moving, so I think.
The Chloe's still there too.
Yeah, so I think this is, the USAC Live is still working, maybe it's her internet.
We're just waiting to see what she's.
Do you want to check if Chloe can see something and just make sure she can still talk?
Hey, Chloe, are you still there? Can you hear
Yeah,
us?
I can still hear you just fine.
Okay, great.
Yeah, so it's probably something
It's
on
the same
her side of the computer or Wi-Fi.
It's the same link.
It might be her Wi-Fi because when the two of us were on earlier, she kept breaking up.
Are you okay?
I'm trying to illustrate to you where you can reallocate. It's pretty limited range of motion. Most of the funds, and again, I'll continue to try to highlight to you where our decision points are, where your decision points are. But by and large, where there is a referendum that says, EDT shall have a travel fund, that you can't really change that. Now that's where later in the year when surplus occurs, that's why surplus is always of interest, because that is an opportunity, that is money that came into this year from the previous year. And when that occurs, those basic channels aren't necessarily, that's when you can redirect money. It's different.
Is there the one where you can apply for t-shirts but not food?
Soup is t-shirts, but not food, right? Contingency is food. Not food. Is that right?
So, yes.
Okay, contingency is food. And soup is definitely t-shirts.
Okay, thank you.
Also,
Are there any updates since you're on? She's not replying. She's not.
We sent her an
She's not replying on the video.
Office funds that can be reactivated.
Jump ship.
Contingency is specified, that is primary funding source for CEC and CAC. So anything that fund is split between CAC and CEC. So again,
Still look at my money. Eyeing my fund. I'm kidding.
So.
What's
What is CC?
I've never heard of that. They don't do anything.
Clearly.
They have nice pens.
They do have nice
Yeah,
pens.
when you write, it's like you're writing on a fluffy cloud. It's beautiful.
Do they have anything?
Oh, Savon just, she said, I'm just lost. Wait.
Yeah, that's like all we do. No, but you want to give out
And that's gonna be channeled by the referendum.
We're gonna be giving them out at November
Whereas
activities
sometimes
too.
if there's a split, you'll see that split in the
No.
expense.
It's the 20.
Look at the expense area, you can see, like that.
Shouldn't you sign up for a table?
It's gone more than 10%.
But it's not her.
Well, there may- sometimes
I didn't do
referendum.
The deadline already passed. Just that.
So I'll just have.
Oh, no, she doesn't do it, I do it.
If the referendum, because
Do-
referendum, they give additional-
We didn't send it anything?
No one sent me anything.
I guess you're not there. If only you, if only,
The two best commissions didn't get anything.
I guess the commission that's putting on didn't want you guys there.
Are you serious?
Well, she puts it on.
Yeah, we didn't invite you to this year. I'm kidding, I don't
We're
even
just
do
gonna
shit.
finish the meeting, everyone. We're just
You're
gonna finish the meeting.
Get in there.
You're no longer, you're no longer quorum, so you can't take any action, but I don't think there was any action to be had tonight. So you can go on for information only purposes.
Right, yeah, exactly.
True.
So I mean, my biggest goal is to, get this information out for you all, so that you can understand what your range of motion is, what your choices are, so that you can prepare for the next time, the next meeting, and you really sort of, then you'll be able to make motions, I think we should, and so I will again continue to highlight where your sort of decision points are and where your range of motion is, but again, I want to kind of come back to just giving you an overview so you're comfortable with the way it all works. So one thing I realized would be good for me to point out is, this budget's broken into two large areas. One is the budgetable income that's on the top, and then there's budgetable expense. They equal each other in total, but sometimes there can be detail in the way the income comes in versus kind of the way it's shown as expense budget. So sometimes a commission may have more than one source of income, more than one referenda that is directing money to that commission. That'll be reflected more in the expense budget, whereas it might be shown a slightly different way in the income budget, because the income budget, Debbie and her crew need to keep track of the source of money, and sometimes there can be subtle distinctions, perhaps, in terms of the way the referendum describes. There might be some subtle distinctions, say, in campus events that shall there be money to have concerts? Shall there be money to have speakers? Now, there is a distinction that exists, but I'm just trying to say that there could be distinctions that derive from the description of the referenda. Again, that's what really guides us. When SGA is saying, you're asking, can I do this, can I do that? Generally, what that is an interpretation of the referenda, or your bylaws, or your constitution, not so much judgments on the fiat of the management. It's just enforcing your own rules or the referenda language. So that's why there can be some differences between the budgetable income. So in a sense, the budgetable income is of interest because that's how the money comes in. But in terms of those of you who are really focused on expendable money, what you have to spend on your programs, that's really shown a little bit more clearly in the expense area, which is the bottom. Because that's going to show you what money you have from whatever sources. So explain to you the remainder. So your overhead. So there's also a Schedule B. So if you were to print it, it's the second tab or it's the third page if you were to print it. That is detail of your what's called administrative overhead. What's the top line on your budgetable expense? That's going to detail out some of the line items that you're going to have in your overhead. So that's going to be officer stipends. That's going to be your administrative and support services, which is essentially Debbie and her group and Jessica in her office. And those expenses are shared with GSA. Your maintenance expense and utilities are based on square footage, so you do share in that expense. But your allocation, is that a plea for attention?
No, it's just her joining in.
Oh, good.
Okay, so,
Well, can't speak, but it's, what can hear, I hope.
She's here.
Okay,
She's also here in spirit. All of our
great.
okay, so your maintenance and your utilities are essentially going to be based on square footage allocated to USA. And some of that you are sharing with the larger student community. So where you've given offices through your USAC mechanism to other student groups, you're paying the costs that do exist for the office space. That also includes the phones. If they have a phone line, without them, they have phones that they've been there all the time. Your finance committee, your budget review, your election board budget, that can be important with your election board budget, your retreats budget. You have a council discretionary. So these are things that clearly you can change. You don't necessarily, so you have a $16,000 budget here for council discretionary. One reason we put that in a number of years ago is sometimes, later in the year, some issue comes up or something comes up that the council wants to be able to address, but so much of the money is locked in specific channels that there's no flexibility to address something that the council as a whole wanted to have some funds to address. That's what the council discretionary fund is. Does it need to be 16,000? No, you could reduce it. You could increase it if you could reduce something else. So these are areas you can look at and decide what you want to do. You pay some money for your computer center. So the other thing that I would want to illustrate, you have a USA secretary. So that is $10,000 to pay for whatever you determine. Last year's council wanted to use that to pay a modest stipend to chiefs of staff from all the offices. At some point in the year past, there were a couple of chiefs of staff in the president's office. That's how the chiefs of staff in the president's office were paid. That's all judgment for the council to make. The other main thing that I think you want to grapple with is there was some thinking coming out of last year, and this has certainly been something considered for a number of years. You every other year have OSACs, the Office Space Allocation Committee. Last year was an OSAC year, so the way it's functioned for years is every other year you reallocate the space that you can reallocate. So this is primarily really relates to the student groups that you allot space to. African Student Union, Iranian Student Health Student Group. There's a number of them, and as you go through the fifth, fourth, and third floor, you'll see those spaces. Though you only reallocate every 2 years, there is kind of an oversight. I mean, it's your space. We try not to act like we're landlords so much. We have to make sure that we're all safe in the building and that there are fire codes and that we're not all at risk of being injured in a fire. But we try to leave most of those judgments to you to understand your space, and your office space allocation committee is the one who does that, who decides that the space is not being well used. You were supposed to use it for office space and you just have storage, or you just, it's junk, you never, whatever judgments your group wants to make is affected by the office space allocation committee. The flaw that a number of councils have found is that it's only in office every other year. So next year there is no office space allocation anyway. So there's some thinking that you might want to have some limited stipend level so that you can continue at least, a singular or a partial year office space allocation committee person to be your agent to oversee the spaces you have allocated to make sure they are well used. So that's currently in this budget is $5,610. You could leave it in, you could take it out. You could make it half that amount because it's going to be a light year because it's an off year. So, that's an area where you've got some judgment that you can make. You don't need to have USA secretary if you don't want it. You can double it by reducing your council discretionary fund. So those are probably, so the other main thing I would want to highlight to you is that you certainly have had, you had a significant increase in resources last year from both the social justice and UCLA wellness initiatives. The UCLA wellness initiative had a characteristic in which it steps up for 3 years. So it was $6 in sum total in the first year, it went to 12 this year, and next year it will go to 18. So it steps up each year. I think it then adjusts for inflation, whereas the social justice referendum went directly to a certain amount of money, and it then adjusts according to consumer price index annually. A number of your other fees are adjusted annually for consumer price index. Those are all reflected here in your fee schedule. The other main significant difference that you have is that a number of these fees are now collected in summer. The social justice and wellness are summer fees. And so that is reflected in the budget and also in estimated enrollment, because enrollment is key to your projected budget because it's essentially each student pays in, and so how many students is that? We kind of budgeted it at a hard actual number from last year. In practice, we had 14,797 payers into the summer fees last summer. So that's what you're using as your base for projecting next, this summer that we're in currently. So I think that's most of my overview, unless I'm missing some part of the key overview. Anyone like to see a key part of the overview? And then I'm certainly open to your questions. One more. Yeah.
Just a quick question for the stipends for FICA alternates.
I'm sorry.
For finance committee alternates, are they paid positions?
The finance committee?
Yeah, the
finance committee, the whole committee is paid. I think the chair gets a larger stipend than the others, but each of the 5 positions is stipend. As is the budget review director. I'm not sure what they're doing. And that's what, essentially, that's what the budget line item is their stipends.
Can I answer that?
Okay, sorry, chair, correct?
Oh, right, of course, we just took the lead, so I was just letting, Meta question.
Yeah. I don't know if anyone, I mean, personally, I don't know, like, obviously if my name's next to it, I'm like, oh, that's like money going to me. But like, is there gonna be a key to where like I know what funds I have applicable to myself? So, yeah.
Well, so two parts of that answer.
This is a lot, and I don't know how to like kind of decode it, you know?
Yeah, you might have money on 2 lines, because one thing we did last year was new money that came in from the wellness and social justice referendum. We wanted to sort of bring in a different, with a great deal of clarity. So you probably have money on at least 2 lines, right?
So like the entertainment fees, that the 360 is that split between capital?
Well, so in a sense, so entertainment fee, you've got half of it. CAC has half. Brew and Bash, I would characterize as being not so much your fee, as being a fee that your office and the CAC office traditionally, primarily due to competence in programming, take the lead for the council to expend those monies. But they've got to be used for, there's only 2 purposes they can be applied to. Brew and Bash, enormous activities fair.
Okay.
They can't be used for anything else.
Oh, I see. So those are specific to those.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
so that's what I was saying, certain things are directed. Now, when you get to it, what I would say is Debbie, as she's beginning to do now,
so that's half of
That's half of the entertainment and then your other.
Okay.
Debbie, as she is beginning to do now, but in general, what I would recommend to you is, especially those of you who have significant amounts of money to be expended, is really the best thing to do is to get a time, go sit down with Debbie. What you want to see is what history looked like, because that really helps. What did the predecessors do? What is historical? That doesn't mean you have to do it that way, but it informs your actions to know what's been done in the past. And Debbie will have all the information. She'll sort of guide you through a budgeting process, and without doing that, you're kind of going, a bit blind.
Yeah.
So Debbie's your big resource, especially those of you that have big budgets.
Summertime, we're just trying to close the year.
Yeah.
Yeah, and stop you guys from trying to spend money. And then August 1, I'll send you an email to everybody with referendums and explain.
Yeah, and as Debbie's illustrated, so part of what's really critical, and as we said here before, your money really, the door really opens August 1. So, that gives you time to start to make your plan and to sort of make an orderly budget and to, a lot of your offices have multiple programs that you'll be determining how you're allocating between different programs of your commission. So those are things you'll want to do. Most of those are not subject to council approval. So what council's going to do is approve, that it's almost like when the council approves the electoral outcome, it's kind of, some of these things, you can't really change it. Somebody's got to approve it though. You're approving your budget, which is going to enable Debbie to put it in and to put the money into your account. And then you're going to make some sub-decisions and make sub-allocations. Okay?
Question. I have like two questions kind of. One, does it say anywhere that we actually need telephones for all the offices? Because that's $12,000 a year that I doubt anyone uses or knows where their phones are.
I mean, I use it.
Do you actually use your?
People call us.
Yeah.
Oh,
Well, so
our phone was like lost. We just found our phone.
Given the observation that I would want to make in response to you, I appreciate your observing that you use yours. I mean, partly, that is often an observation. We have reduced those phone numbers and landlines down a lot over the years. And what we've encouraged you to do is consider, paring them back where they're unnecessary. But some of these things are historical lines. Sometimes the outside world is like there's a community service commission. It's all determined by individual students' cell phones, which is primarily the way you're doing your main business. But if that's the only thing, then it's difficult to establish continuity over time. In a year you'll be out of office and somebody else will be in. So I certainly will acknowledge to you that it is your right to determine this. I would just want to put forward a cautionary note that some core infrastructural things are probably prudent in terms of your stewardship of the larger association. I know that it isn't how you tend to do your day-to-day work, but there is just some core, it's like, okay, yeah, another question.
My other question is there, because I've seen in 2015, 2016, it looks like we gave at least between 500 to 1,000 to like facilities, FSC, the Gen Reps, IVP, and president. Is there, and like.
Just let me catch up with you.
So like all the offices that don't get money basically in 2015, 2016.
Oh, you're talking SGO?
Just like the income, like it looks like facilities, FSC, the 3 Gen Reps, IVP, Pres, we're all kind of getting some money, but it looks like.
Are you looking at a different document?
What tab are you?
I'm on the first tab.
Okay, what line? Are we in the income area or the expense?
Income.
You see the far left line number? Can you see that?
67.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, okay. There's like basically like the facilities commission, the FSC office, the Gen Reps, they're not really getting like.
Starting at line 6.
Well, actually, I didn't pronounce that. You have that line.
Or wasn't it
Cultural
62?
affairs, arts, and community.
62.
Facilities commission.
Yeah, like facilities, financial.
Okay, I get it.
Gen Rep,
Like those are actual
I get it.
expenses.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what you're seeing are, okay, so when you look at, if you start to look at the actuals line, that's gonna be a little bit different than your budget. So that often can help guide you. Sometimes that can be a good indicator of that's actual expenditures. So there can be different ways that those offices will get money. It could be an allocation from a funding body that then makes the funds available to that office, but that the source of the money is elsewhere. Or that another university funding body transfers money into SGA that then makes it available for a purpose and it's a determined purpose. It could be other income. Some offices will fundraise. And if you have a fundraiser and you have an event that gets $524, $42, then that would show there as an actual. It isn't necessarily that it was a budget from your mandatory fees. So your actuals will reflect all of your expenditures. It also would include surplus monies. that could be redirected, so it's not quite the same as your budget.
Okay, so I just wanna make sure I understand this, because that's like budgetable expense, so does that mean what those offices, like it looks like for this year it's zero in all those offices, but in the past they had somewhere between 500 to 1,000. So is there anything we can do to give at least, because I know some offices are getting like hundreds of thousands of dollars, while other offices are getting nothing, so is there anything we can do to give at least facilities, FSC, Gen Reps, President, IVP, like offices that aren't getting anything, at least 1,000 or 500?
So I get where you're coming from. So some of that is what SUF is, So Debbie, the way you reveal this information, it's the SUF SGOF money. Is that reflected by the office line, or does that stay on SGOF? See, if, I think, so, okay, so Debbie, once you reallocate, so usually the SGOF is divided equally amongst different offices. So,
Yeah, wait, why is transfer?
what happens is that when you, when you divide your SGOF amongst the offices that receive it, Debbie's going to then allocate it from the SGOF line to the individual offices. So that's why it shows, if you look back in the 15-16 actuals column, it says 0. But it was not. So that was distributed. Now, that said, I just want you to know that certain monies to those offices that have no budget, that's what SGOF does. Now, you could determine that you don't think that's adequate and affect that in a number of different ways. You could affect the budget such that the remainder increases, and therefore the pot that's divided, I think by 5 or 6, I'm not sure how many offices it is divided amongst.
Just those offices that don't have a budget?
They don't have dedicated referendum committee. It's either 5 or 6 offices. So if you increase the total remainder, that will increase how much they get. You could also take, $6,000 from your council discretionary and add it to SGOF so that it's divided equally amongst those offices. That's certainly something that you can choose to direct additional resources. You just have to identify where the resources come from.
I don't know where.
Justin?
Roy?
I have a line of questions, I'll spread them over everyone's questions. So first question I have, who proposes membership fee changes? Like how does the membership fee change over the year?
Okay, so all of your mandatory fees, and so that's membership fee, that's all of these 7 lines, are all things that the council at some point in the past has placed on the ballot, and that the electorate voted. If it passed, it determined an amount of money. Some of them, in the deeper past, they were always tended to be static numbers. In more recent times, the recognition was made that if you would index it to the consumer price index and have it automatically increase, it wouldn't lose its purchasing power. So some of them increase because they're indexed. But that indexing had to be in the original referendum that was voted.
Gotcha.
It cannot retroactively be placed. So this membership fee is very old.
Okay.
And it's $10. It's been $10 forever.
And then also, do you know what happened with judicial? I saw somewhere on there, judicial boards, like were allocated funds, but then like started to trickle, and now it's only $100. And I know it's always been 100. Okay. And next council will need to start reallocating. Because I know last year, when I was on the board, our chief justice had to go like out of her pocket to buy us all the resources that we need every case that we did.
Right, well, so your knowledge of that, functioning of that commission, certainly exactly, part of what I would want you guys to do is sort of know where your range of motion is and form your proposals.
One question, Vivian?
Where's the transfer student rep budget on here?
I can't do.
Where's the transfer student rep budget on here?
I don't believe there is a budget for transfer.
But there's no like even indication that there is a transfer student rep office.
I think it's under general representatives.
So for the transfer rep,
Well, it goes under, it's all the same, but I think that there should be a distinction that it's a different, because that.
No, we know that it's a separate department.
Yeah.
But when they were added,
Yeah,
Just added it to.
because the budget's the same. You start with the same 542, right? Because that's what I started with last year. I think all the gen reps.
So the 542 probably derived from the SGOF remainder money divided by,
So
the reason they're all the same is divided by 5 or 6.
Yeah, so this year they're not getting anything to start with, correct?
No, so at the bottom you see 3,984.
Yeah.
The only thing I don't know is how many people are in the pool. It's either 5 or 6. Debbie, you know, how many people SGOF is divided among?
Where does the number of friends?
I mean, it's at least
okay.
the 3
That's
reps,
how they
the
get
other
it.
rep, the FSC. I don't think IDP has dedicated money.
Yeah, they get that 5, whatever, 542.
6, 37. So if you divide that number by 7, that would be this year's number. So one way to affect that is to change the remainder. The other thing I meant to point out that is a range of motion for you is, you know, if you don't seem to need to do it this year, and I thought you would have to, but next year you probably will have to, there is an increasing amount of resources available to contingency. Contingency in your bylaws for a very long time has always started with 10% of your membership fee. And that's what it is here. So you'll see there's 2 places where it's represented. You're gonna see an upper map contingency that is at 90,000, 060, and then a little further down from UCLA Wellness, you see a $209,000. So historically, there only would have been the 90, and last year there would have been 90 plus 100, and now there's 90 plus 200. So as it gets additional resources, I think you really have an opportunity, and if you don't do it this year, you'll probably need to do it next year to cover your overhead. Because you'll have inflationary increases you won't be able to cover. You could change your bylaw to say 10% does not go to contingency, that first line item, but that instead 7% goes. And if you didn't do anything other than change that, there would therefore be more money for SGOF and for the student organization operating fund as well. So you'd be giving more money to student groups, you'd be giving more money for your offices, which are being, you know, that amount of money doesn't buy that much, you know, after inflation is eroding. Okay.
Zara?
Yeah, so just one question, maybe like, I'm just not able to wrap my head around this, but like, what exactly, I guess I have 2 questions. So like, one, what exactly determines how each office starts with their original budget? Because like, are there like specific, like sustained programming that's happened within those offices, and like, that's the reason that they receive those budgets from the get-go? Or like with EVP, like there's Broom Defenders, but like Broom Defenders isn't listed as an actual line, but like would that just be because that money is already housed within the EVP office, or like how does that work?
Yeah, so primarily it's that there's referenda that said shall X amount be assessed for X purpose. Now X purpose might be more generally described, and it might be more narrowly described. It just depends on the referendum. No matter what, even if it's narrowly described, it's the commissioner or the office that receives or is the steward of that money to specifically define a program. So Ruin Defenders would be the EVP would have decided, with my funding that I get from X referenda, I want to assert that this would be an effective program for the student body, so I want to have this program. So then they would budget, just as Netta will sort of, with the money she has, she'll say, I want to have this much for my, you know, hip hop explosion, if that's what
Speakers?
Whatever the programs are.
Hip hop explosion.
You know,
Maybe we'll add that this year.
sorry, wrong commission. I know it's a big program and a lot of contracts. But, so there's detailed programs that then is the range, and that's some of the real work that's going to be done subsequent to this. So a lot of the real meat of the work is being done after this budget. You're not putting it into this budget. This is the enabling budget that's going to enable the officer or the commissioner to then sub-budget. So where they get these main lines is the descriptors in the referenda and direct funding.
Okay, so more specifically than with TGIF, the Facilities Commission is not the steward of that budget. That's just like a separate entity. And then, so what is the Facilities Commission's like specific relationship with TGIF?
its only relationship is that the TGIF bylaws specify representation on that committee. And it defines that the interim or the initial chair, subject to the committee's determining a different chair. The initial chair is the facilities commission.
Okay.
And I think the facilities commission assigns a second person to it.
Yeah.
So though that's the only specific relationship, is that it's a natural and ever-present participation. But it isn't the commissioner's direction, other than the degree to which the commissioner remains chair and kind of directs, chairs the committee's discussion.
Okay, that makes sense, thank you.
Any other questions?
Yes.
So, the fact that these budgets are, like pre-office budgets are supposed to referendum passed. So there were like referendums being passed that allocated or budgeted $245,000 for CAC. Those are often referendums.
Not specific now, that's what.
Yeah, are we talking about the income or the budget?
The budget for 2016-17 last year.
Do you mean?
That's RC. That's CRC?
Yeah. Okay, so
CAC.
campus retention.
Community activities.
Okay, that's outsourced to university.
Oh, not community, okay, not that. It's different CAC.
Yeah.
That makes more sense.
Activities committee is a funding body.
Okay.
And the reason it gets the money is that.
Oh, for the arts.
And I believe art restoring, yes.
Okay.
So art restoring is generally administered by the Cultural Affairs Commission, but it isn't their fund.
Oh.
Kind of like way Bruin Dash, it isn't CEC and CAC's fund, but they administer.
Student groups will apply and, kind of like how ABC's travel mini fund. Students will apply and then they'll review that and decide to invest money.
And part of what's critical is any funding body has to have criteria, and often those criteria are subject to the council's approval. Because it needs to be consistent, it needs to be publicized, it needs to be objective, it can't be subjective, and everybody needs to be able to have a shot at if they fit the defined purpose of the
Viewpoint neutral, question mark? Viewpoint neutral? Is that what you're trying to?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well,
That's his favorite word.
neutral regarding viewpoint is really the best way to put it.
You should tell that.
Right, you don't have to, it's a kind of an important distinction, I don't mean to, but it doesn't, you don't need to be neutral on having any viewpoints. A group can apply for something and they can have a viewpoint. It doesn't, you're not required to have a neutral viewpoint. You're required to fund other groups without regard to the viewpoint of the group. Yeah. That's the real critical distinction you have to understand. And that's where you're funding other groups. Where you're having a program, you can have speech, so to speak. You can have a viewpoint, you need to make sure you're being. But the real critical distinction is when you're funding others, you can't obstruct their voice.
Yeah.
The Room Bash fee that we collect for Room Bash, can that not be subsidized by the entertainment fees?
No. No.
Well, you can't redirect, okay, the entertainment fee, you cannot redirect it. Netta and
Break up the commission quick, huh?
Netta and Malik could choose to give some of their resources to it, but that's their choice.
Well, I'm looking like, if you have all that money that those two officers are getting, why have to just pay for Room Bash for it's hundreds of thousands of dollars?
Well, Bruin Bash is really expensive.
Is it the 90?
Okay, so the Bruin Bash story is when Bruin Bash was invented, originally the only way the council really could pay for it, because it is expensive. It's a large event, it's a complex event, and it tends to have very notable headliners that are not inexpensive. So the way for years that the council managed to pay for Bruin Bash was from its surplus. Surplus was normally large enough every year that I could indicate to the council that some modest percentage of the fee could be directed to that purpose.
Do we know how much it has cost to produce Green Bash last year?
We do.
as
Yeah.
a-
We were actually in debt last year, so, right? We had to
Well,
Well, not debt,
well, like, we had to
but-
withdraw from like our yearly budget. So it's like significant enough to where like even these, like what we're allocated doesn't cover what we would like.
Okay, and then do you
Plus-
pay the performers also?
Yeah,
They don't
I
pay for
mean,
free.
they're not volunteers.
Yeah, you don't get Chancellor Rapper for free, he doesn't donate, or whoever. you know.
Yeah.
I mean, you can.
Well, you can ask.
I can get-
You can.
I can get some.
If you can get me Chance the Rapper for free, send me an email.
Let's talk. I know
Maybe we
someone.
can get him free in other ways.
The other thing that's, just to understand about Bruin Bash is actually Bruin Bash plus the enormous activities fair, which isn't that expensive, but it is part of what is authorized to be funded through that revenue.
Zara?
Yeah, one last question for me. So I see that there are several support fees for CRC, CAC, SIAC. So, what determined these committees getting funding through this budget? And if there are other committees that would like to apply, what would the process look like?
Well, so those funds are directed to those bodies because the original referenda determined sort of that purpose, or a purpose that, previous councils long ago, I think that, originally at its inception, the referendum wouldn't necessarily, I don't believe, say, campus retention committee, but it would have defined the purpose that is the core of, say, campus retention committee's mission. That committee is the committee that was formed kind of long ago, and that the council approved as being the designee, the delegate. So the council delegated to that committee the allocation of the funds. It is a relationship between the council and CRC. We are looking forward to CRC and SIOC coming to council in probably March of next year and given some sort of report on their activities as the original. So there's memorandums of understanding that define the characteristics of that relationship, including that they need to come and give a report annually.
So just on SIOC, thank you, and CRC, specifically those committees they have like a two-pronged approach on things. So like they are a funding body for the retention and access project, but they also have the ability to put on programs and also like use that money specifically for like UCLA students on campus. So that's another reason of why they have that fund in the first place, and when they were created within their inception, when there was a referendum to have that money allocated towards them. But this past year, I know that they didn't do too much with programming. So what we should do, what we should look towards doing, or talking to the different committees, is just making sure that they know that programming is a two-pronged process, part of their committee. Because last year I know that they didn't, CRC in particular did not program often.
So if I could just add to your point, I mean, I think that's right. And I think there's two ways in which the council gives input into those committees. One is in the MOUs that originally formed those groups. That's why you have appointing power to those bodies. So your appointees, the number of you have, and that come before the council for approval, those are your points of input to their programs. And then secondarily, again, annually, they are to come to council and give some report on their activities. And that's an opportunity for interaction and input on their programs and to get, the larger, that's what your responsibility is, to be aware of the sentiments of the student body.
Okay, so if,
Sorry.
okay, no, it's okay, you go first.
So just from understanding, between now and September, when the academic year actually starts, and some students choose not to go to UCLA for some reason, is that going to have any material effect on membership fees?
If the student withdraws, student accounting has some rules as to, if you withdraw at X date, you get X refund. If you withdraw at Y date, you will get some partial refund. Those are all over time. In the end, the budget reflects an estimation. of what will occur. In the end, when you get to the point you have a surplus, there will be actuals that occur. If a student withdraws, that will affect the actual. In practice, what that would affect is what your remaining surplus is really at the end of the year, because none of the money ever leaves the system. So the actual will affect how much surplus there is, which will roll into next year.
Any other questions? Justin?
Goodness gracious, I can't find where I had my question.
Remember you got to
A lot of your questions will be answered once the departments with referendum is coming to me, because I'm gonna ask you for another breakdown, and you include those.
I do have a question.
Wait, so he has a question.
Oh, okay.
I just wanted, so this is all of ASUCLA's budget, correct? Which is like all the different tabs?
No, ASUCLA is, so eventually, once you approve your budget, it will be forwarded to the ASUCLA Board of Directors, we got point to. Their only input is they will review it for fiscal soundness. All they're really gonna do is make sure you're not trying to spend more money than you have. They've got no say and will have no say, or would try to have no say in your judgments as to how you're spending the money and what your programs are. They're just gonna make sure, they gotta make sure that you're not gonna spend yourself into insolvency.
Oh, yeah, that's my question. So regarding on Brew and Bash and so if planning budget wise, how sound are these numbers? If I was gonna make estimates.
Very sound. I mean, essentially what we're saying to each of your offices who have money is that this is the amount, once the council approves it, you are authorized to spend. There's some subtle distinction. It's a little bit over collected, a little bit under collected. That's not going to be brought to you. It's not an issue for you. This will be your authorized spending level. Now, in working with you, when you get to the point you want to offer, I usually sign off on your offer letters. And all I'm really doing is saying, you do all your negotiation, you pick the talent, you communicate to them, but I'm signing the bottom to say, these are real students, and if they make a commitment, the universe is going to honor and they got money. But I can't sign it if you're trying to offer more money than you got. Right? If you're trying to offer somebody $200,000, I can say you can't do that. But that doesn't happen. Yeah, this is your authorized spending level.
Anyone else?
Just a quick question. If for Brew Bash, they have extra money, does that go to CBC or does that go for the next enormous activities? Is that saved for the spring activities fair?
So as it is with essentially all the fees, within the fiscal year, so your idea, if any of you have money to spend, what you're really trying to do, you are stewards, you collected money from the current student body. What you're trying to do is spend it for the good of this student body. You're not trying to not spend it. It's supposed to be spent on the people that paid. Now, at the end of the year, you can't spend every cent. Nobody can be that precise. There are remainders. Any money not spent in those accounts become what we call surplus. When it crosses the fiscal boundary, and we'll bring this to you around November, hopefully, and this will be money from last year, from the 16-17 body. Any monies from referenda that in the end weren't able to be spent, despite your best efforts, that becomes what we call surplus. And you guys then vote on how to handle that surplus. A lot of that surplus your bylaws currently want to direct to certain things, like to the USA programming fund. So a lot of it is just sent back into the student group community to contingency. And some of it goes into your endowment that comes back to student groups. So, but there is flexibility here.
Is last year's surplus on here?
Generally speaking, if you look at 16-17, the $418,000 number is the remainder, the money that ended up unspent.
Okay,
and would that be too late to put that in as Scott pursuit, like in November, if you vote to add that, to do some of that to those funds?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh.
So November, the offices could potentially get more of a budget.
Yes, you could.
So you said November is when the 2016-17, whatever's remaining is gonna go into surplus. So between now and then, do we have the jurisdiction to use that money?
Well, so 16-17 money, essentially, you have to consider it's not your money.
Okay.
what we're doing is we're just continuing, we have to finish paying the bills, not all the recs have come in of actions that were already committed to by the previous council and the previous commissioners. So really, no, you can't really spend their money.
So just gonna kind of stay intact until November.
Well, we gotta finish paying all the bills. It's possible that somebody, didn't pay some bill that the association is obligated to pay. We gotta surface all that stuff. There's a lot of activity that just comes in late because the rec, sometimes students, they just don't, they're trying to have programs, they're not trying to be accountants, so, trying to get all the recs into the system and then we have to audit everything. You won't get your surplus until we get thoroughly audited by an external auditor. Currently it's KPMG. So that's part of what gives you a surety that, your monies are well managed by SGA. So we'll be audited once the audit is complete. It's the same auditor who does ASU, CLA, GSA, student media. The auditor will go through it and that's when we can then identify. So it's hard to understand why it takes as long as it does, but it's because there's a lot of steps.
So for example, if I have someone on my staff from last year that submits a rec after the end of this month, because isn't the end of this month the deadline? That's where I'm trying to sort this out. If there's between the end of this month and November, could we submit recs after if there's something that comes up?
Well, in a sense, what I want to say is
no.
Because we're not trying to open any doors for people to come up with expenditure. We're not.
Yeah.
We've got to close the year so that we can turn it around, get audited, and set you guys up to spend your money. So there's a but. But something we're obliged to do. We're not going to leave some student hanging who missed the thing. It's on their credit card. They spent $1,000. It's clearly for a purpose that was the association's business that was committed to. We're not going to leave them hanging. There's a mechanism for us to pay a bill from last year. It's called out of period unanticipated expense. So there's a line. I'll show you when we go through surplus. You'll see that line. And that's how we pay things that we're obliged to pay. But we're trying to get you to close down the spending to get so if there's bills that need to be paid, try to get them now, not November. But we're not going to leave certainly a student or a key vendor who's owed money, and it's a clear obligation of the association. The association makes good on its obligations, your association.
Is the student initiative access committee or the student initiative outreach committee?
They change their name every 3 years.
Rebrand themselves. So when it said that they actually spent 640, but they were budgeted 704, I just want to change that. So what was it?
So sorry.
I know but we're so great.
So when it said that they actually spent 640, they were budgeted 705. So they didn't spend somewhere around.
Okay, so we're looking at 2 different years. Which is when they.
Oh, you're right.
Yeah, I think my why years.
Yes, one is actual, one is a original budget. Budget is just not one is an actual. So the some bodies, with student initiative outreach committee, due to with the memorandum of understanding in place between council and that committee, we transfer the money to that committee, and that committee is charged with spending. So it doesn't become part of your surplus. They are supposed to handle it. It's part of what they should report back to you. How did they handle those funds that are your funds? That they're charged with properly.
You're supposed to spend it all, right? Correct.
All of the offices are supposed to spend money on the student body that paid the money.
Yeah, academic success. Why would that?
Anyone else have questions? Okay.
Awesome questions. Thank you very much. Really good questions. Thank you for
Roy.
engaging and trying to understand it.
We love you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now we're going to move into announcements, and I'm just gonna give a quick announcement just to start it off. So Vivi wanted to remind everyone to send her a blurb about what your office is about so that she can put it in the pamphlet to distribute during orientation and the activities fair, either or, just send her what your office is about as soon as possible. Who else has an announcement? Yeah.
So the Sanctuary Campus Initiative peeps are creating a reading list. So that'll be distributed online and on AAC website as well. Just a reading list of like student progressivism and progressive activism on UCLA's campus, also sanctuary campus policies, and the resources that the university does have that aren't visible currently for communities that are being affected by the administration currently. Okay. No problem.
Question?
Are there any other UCs right now that are pushing for like a sanctuary campus?
I mean, there are a lot of colleges around the nation that are pushing for a sanctuary campus. We're working on a what's that called?
Resolution.
Resolution. Me and my girl Nicole are also working on it. Someone jump in, props Christina, props other people, but added. But yeah, we're working on a resolution too. So we'll try and connect with the other UCs through the academic guild this summer, this month, I don't know, whenever. TBD, as always.
Can I make a question?
Yeah, of course.
A
Yeah,
comment,
come through.
or like a suggestion. I don't know if this is possible, but maybe it could be one of the like campaigns for UCSOS.
So it can't be a campaign for UCSOS. I already have for UCSA. I think they already have a couple ideas for what they're doing, but I'll bring it up to them. I think that the only problem is distinguishing what's different between different universities, because universities itself define sanctuary as different places as well. So we can't really loop it into a whole campaign because we don't know what other UCs define as sanctuary or other college campuses as well. So what we're trying to do is make sure that UCLA is on one page of it, and then we can also have other colleges mimic it. I know Western Washington University is looking at doing it with us. A lot of the students that we had with the UC or with the Western walkout last year, we have contacts with them. Washington, University of Washington, NYU, what else? Those college campuses are doing it, but it's their own definition of what sanctuary is to them.
And I just felt like it's kind of more like easier. It's like a whole California-wide like UC thing. Like when you're
It's like a sanctuary state right now,
Yeah.
but I think that it would be problematic if we were to put what sanctuary is in a box for a campaign, specifically just because, I mean, it means different things to different universities. But I think that's the stuff. I mean, if that's what people want to do, then that's what people want to do. I'll bring it up at UCSA anyways.
More announcements?
Oh, yeah, I have something. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, cool. So Divya actually reminded me of this, but kind of a policy-related issue area, something to just kind of keep tabs on. So I'm in DC right now, so I've been working pretty closely on a lot of the immigration legislation. And so there are two bills this week that the House was considering, one called Kate's Law and another one related to sanctuary city defunding. And so Kate's Law unfortunately passed this morning, and the House is considering the sanctuary city bill tomorrow. And effectively what this would do is that any city, whether it be local or basically any type of like non-federal jurisdiction, if they declare themselves to be a sanctuary city, then essentially what this bill would do is cut them off from any Department of Justice or DHS funding. And so where this kind of becomes an issue is that for example, some schools, their Title IX programs, so sexual assault programs, come from Department of Justice grant funding. And so this would have a pretty huge negative impact on a lot of institutions of higher education. And so I believe there are about like 403 different like organizations, like mayors, a bunch of different organizations that submitted letters opposing this. But we're still expecting it to pass tomorrow. And so just something to kind of consider, especially since we're talking a lot about immigration and the sanctuary city movement.
So Chloe, I have a quick question. Wait, can she hear me? Hello, Chloe.
Yes.
Okay, what can we do specifically? Do you want us to call people or something? Like, is there a number we can call or?
So unfortunately, there's really not much that we can do right now because, so the reason why this bill is able to come to the floor is that they purposely, so it's very unusual. So originally the plan was to have 3 immigration bills come through the House this week, and that's actually very unusual. Usually you only have 1 max, and the expectation was that so many people would be caught up with healthcare that there'd be fewer people paying attention to immigration. And so at this point, calling doesn't really do anything, unfortunately, since they're voting on this, I believe, starting tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. when they're starting debates. But if you are interested, I can still post a couple numbers in the group me, and then you can feel free to disseminate it. But my gut feeling is that it's not going to be doing too much at this point since people are just voting down party lines. And so since the Republicans have the majority, we're expecting it to pass.
Thanks for the announcement though, even though it was sad. Love you.
So any other announcements? Work things?
No, mine's September 6th, the day that her application is closed.
Okay, since there's nothing else, then I'm going to take roll again. And I was thinking just to speed this up, I will just list the people who, for the offices that are absent, and then we'll just do roll call for everyone that's here. So the president is absent, IVP is absent, CSC is absent, CAC is absent, and then I'm just gonna do roll call for the rest of the offices. Starting with EVP.
Here.
Great. Gen 1 is here. Gen 2. Gen AAC.
Here.
Great. SWC.
Here.
FAC. CEC. Hello. And transfer student rep. I think. Wait, what is she? What is she saying? Yes. Hello, Saran.
Oh, her face is there.
Yeah, she's.
Okay, so she's here. So and then FSC. Great. So thank you everyone for letting me host this meeting. Yes.
Specifically for proxies, are they here or are they like, because usually proxies aren't voting members, they're not allowed to.
Nor are they present.
Nor are they present.
Okay, so you just don't. I mean, we should have just acknowledged him.
They've been raised to the office, but aren't counted.
Okay, I apologize.
So just like for next
so
time.
for next time, we will not count you in. Okay. Well, again, thank you so much for letting me host this meeting. And we don't have an actual gavel, so I'm just gonna pass the mic and you can say your goodbyes. Goodbyes. Oh. I adjourned the meeting.
Oh, we have to move, right?
Oh, right.
Sorry. I second.
Wait, the meeting is all in favor of wanting to adjourn the meeting. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Chloe.
I'm sure. Honestly, they can't.
Chloe's on. Okay.
Yeah.
Great. So the meeting is officially adjourned by vote of 8 to 0 to 0. Great. At 8:32.
Oh, Saran just called.
Okay.
Hello, Saran?
So now we can close USAC Live.